Hello, my name is 환산스님, and as our MC mentioned, I am the disciple of Sun Master Songdam, who is the most venerated Buddhist master in Korea today. And this particular Dharma assembly is a Sun Buddhist Dharma assembly. And the distinctive feature of Sun Buddhism is its focus on meditation, its devotion to meditation as the primary method of self-cultivation. Now, within the context of Sun Buddhist tradition, the goal is not simply to venerate the Buddha, but to follow in his footsteps, to do as he did, to become as he was, which is to say enlightened. Within Sun Buddhist meditation, we are not satisfied with knowledge or information about the world. This is why within Sun Buddhist tradition, intellectual learning, it's not considered useless, but it is considered secondary. It is considered a less efficient and effective way of knowing things, of knowing about ourselves, of knowing the world. Within the context of Sun Buddhist meditation, the goal is enlightenment, which, to put it in simple terms, means direct perception and experience of the nature of our own existence and also the nature of the reality of the world that seems to surround us. So I think that this is a very sort of dry and theoretical way of putting things. And so I would like to share with you a simple metaphor that I think drives this point home in terms of understanding the distinction between meditation and simply learning about something and knowing about something. Imagine that you've been presented with an apple. And this is the apple of life. It's the apple of consciousness, the apple of awareness, the apple of awareness of being aware, the apple of self-consciousness. So having been gifted with this extraordinary apple, we as meditators are not content to just hold it at arm's length and observe it. We're not satisfied to memorize the list of chemical compounds that make up its composition. We want to bite into it. We want to taste it. We want to receive its nutritional value. We want it to become a part of us. We want to become one with it. Meditation, from the Sun Buddhist perspective, is the way of tasting life, of opening ourselves to it, embracing it, receiving it, harmonizing ourselves with it, and becoming one with it. So what I would like to do with all of you, first of all, is to share with you the method of performing meditation so that we can all perform meditation throughout the course of today's assembly. Now, the method that I'm going to share with you has been taught to me by my teacher, Sun Master Songdam. And Sun Master Songdam's probably great contribution to modern Korean Buddhism is that he took the ancient Sun Buddhist teachings and presents them to modern-day practitioners, people like you and me, in simple, direct, easy-to-understand terms. He doesn't use very much abstraction. He doesn't use, those kind of poetic, mystical aphorisms that are hard to understand, let alone apply in our daily lives. Now, in practicing sun meditation, then, there are three elements that we need to pay attention to, and the first is posture. So why don't we all begin with posture first? You want to tuck one heel in toward your crotch, and then raise your foot, if possible, onto the opposite thigh. And if that's too challenging, then you can place it on the floor. Now take your right hand, take the edge of your right hand and place it against your lower belly. And then just let it rest, just drop it. Then you place your left hand on top, both palms facing the ceiling. Then you have your thumb tips meet each other to form a nice, elegant rainbow shape. Now from here, let's raise both of our shoulders up to our ears, roll them back, and then just drop. So you want to be straight, your spine should be straight. Now from here, with your chin tucked in slightly, take the tip of your tongue and rest it lightly, press it lightly against the roof of your mouth, just behind your upper row of teeth. Now, within traditional Asian spiritual teachings, this tongue position, although it may feel a little bit odd, actually enables the proper circulation of energy through our body. From a modern biological standpoint, putting your tongue against the roof of your mouth activates stabilizing muscles in your neck, making your posture that much more stable. So this is the basic posture. Now from here, we go into the second component of meditation, which is breathing. And breathing will start with preparation breathing. Now in preparation breathing, what we're going to do is we're going to inhale through our noses and completely fill our chest, really fill our chest until it feels like it's going to burst. And when we've completely filled our chest, hold. We're holding our breath until it becomes slightly uncomfortable. Then finally, we're going to release, completely release all of the air in our lungs through our mouths. So inhale, hold, then exhale through your mouth. One final time, inhale, hold, and then exhale. And now we're ready to meditate. So we switch now to the main breathing pattern for sun meditation, which in English I call abdominal breathing. It's also formally called diaphragmatic breathing. So anyway, with diaphragmatic breathing, we're only going to breathe through the nose now. And as we inhale through our nostrils, the air goes down into the balloon, expands it, and pushes our lower belly forward. So we want to breathe in and fill our lower belly to about 80% capacity. So once your lower belly has come out, hold for 2 to 3 seconds. And then when we exhale again through our nose, we draw in our lower belly, pull in our belly button toward our spine. Okay, why don't we practice? So together, inhale, hold, then exhale. Once again, inhale, hold, then exhale. There is an extremely close relationship between our respiration, our breathing pattern, and our mental state. Every time our mental state changes, every time we experience a change in our emotions, our breathing pattern also changes. So if we think of something depressing, we might, sigh. If we get startled, we go, and our breathing pattern changes. When we get angry, our breathing pattern becomes very rough. And within meditation, we take advantage of this close link between breathing and mental states by moving the line of influence in the opposite direction. We control our breathing to exert influence over our mind. By calming our breathing down, we calm our minds. And now we can enter into the third component of meditation, which is a regulation of our thought. What do we think about while we're doing this posture and this breathing that comprises meditation? And the object of meditation in the context of Sun Buddhist practice is what makes Sun meditation distinctive. In Sun meditation, when we meditate, we'll be asking ourselves a question. In formal Buddhist terminology, this question is called a hwadu, H-W-A-D-U, and also called kongan in Korean. That's kungan in Chinese, and some of you who have some background in Buddhism may be familiar with the Japanese pronunciation, which is koan. And the hwadu or kongan that my teacher, Sun Master Songdam, teaches the most is called in Korean 이 뭐고, and that means what is this? What is this that directs my body? When I feel a sensation, what is it within me that is experiencing that sensation? When I feel an emotion, when I become sad, what is it within me that suffers that sadness? When I feel joy, what is it within me that delights at that joy? As we hold this posture and conduct abdominal breathing, what we'll do is we breathe in, hold, and then on the exhalation, in coordination with the out-breath, in our minds we ask, 이 뭐고, and we take that last syllable, G-O, and extend it to the end of the out-breath. So we inhale, hold, and then together, imoko. Now we're not going to repeat the question mindlessly, imoko, 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 in our minds. The sound and the specific syllables and words in themselves have no meaning. What we're trying to do is we are trying to create within our minds what is called within the Sun Buddhist tradition a state of doubt. Okay? It's trying to perceive the unperceivable. Because we try to know the unknowable, we experience a feeling of being blocked, of being obstructed. And that feeling of being blocked and obstructed is the feeling of doubt. So once again, doubt isn't a state of intellectual skepticism. It's not a form of mental agonizing. It is a form of urgently, sincerely needing to know what cannot be known. Stay relaxed and maintain the breathing and keep asking with each breath, Iwoko. And don't worry so much about trying to memorize what's being said today. So for now, focus instead on the meditation. The meditation is what's clear, is what's important. Now, for today's topic, I would like to discuss the uses and goals of meditation in modern society. Right now, actually throughout the world, there's a boom in interest in meditation. There's really just so many uses for meditation that for beginners like ourselves, it's easy to get confused about what meditation really is and what it's really for. And let me just review some of the kinds of uses and goals that you might find for meditation. One is, and this is something that was more prevalent several decades ago than these days, but some people meditate to gain what used to be called supernatural ability. These days it's called, it's been called ESP, like, several decades ago. These days they use the term, paranormal ability, psi ability, and they can include things like learning how to heal by touch or distant healing, gain abilities like telepathy, telekinesis, which means moving objects or affecting material reality with our minds, knowing the future, knowing the past, precognition, memory of past lives, so-called astral projection, which I believe means that your consciousness leaves your body and explores other realms of existence. This was the type of usage and goals of meditation, I believe, around 100 years ago. Meditation was closely linked to the occult back then. And when I mention this goal, actually, I'm not being dismissive of these goals. I am not assuming that these are impossible things. And this is something that I would very much like to share with you before going further on in this discussion. There's a perception that goals like that, these so-called supernatural or psychic abilities, are somehow unscientific and irrational and sort of superstitious and maybe even silly. And when people think that way about these types of ability, what they're really betraying is that they don't really get where science is now. In what's called the classical physics theory of the world, the viewpoint of the world from the point of view of classical physics, those kinds of abilities are impossible. Because from classical physics, and by classical physics I mean physics from the time of, say, Sir Isaac Newton in the 17th century to the time of Albert Einstein, who's officially considered the last classical physicist. In the old scientific viewpoint, the idea was that the only thing that's real is matter, physical material, stuff. And our consciousness is the product of material processes. And the kind of education that I'm sure most of us have received in high school and college and sort of formal educational system runs something like this, that atoms come together to form molecules, molecules come together to form more complicated molecules come together to form organic molecules come together to form cells come together to form organisms, and then organisms evolve under the pressure of environment. And so we develop a nervous system, And we developed instinct and reflexes and primitive learning behaviors. And then somewhere along the line, presto, we have consciousness. We have self-consciousness. And the defining feature of this process is that our consciousness is the consequence of material process. It's the end. If we think of this in terms of the chicken and the egg is material process. Our consciousness is the chicken that was born out of that egg. So by implication then, physical matter precedes consciousness and defines consciousness, and therefore consciousness cannot exert direct influence on physical reality. That explanation makes perfect sense. The only problem is, about 100 years ago, so-called quantum physics theory came out. And they performed experiments, and they found that the relationship with consciousness and matter isn't that simple anymore. And this is, I believe it's called the observer effect, and it's very complicated, and I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. But what the observer effect that has been observed in experiments, it's not a theory, it's an actual experimental finding, but what it basically seems to imply is that subatomic particles and atoms do not exist in a defined state until there is an observing human consciousness. This means that things like electrons don't have position, don't have speed or direction until there's an observing consciousness. And this is called observer-created reality. So literally, these electrons and atoms do not have any physical position in space or time until someone looks at it. This implies that consciousness has to be at least existing at the same time as material existing, if not before. It implies a different relationship between consciousness and matter. It also implies that consciousness can affect material reality directly, although we don't really know why or how. If that's possible, if that's the case, then the idea of our mind exerting some kind of direct influence on our material environment is no longer unscientific. I'll share with you another finding. Within classical physics, if I have two objects and they're separated in space, let's say object A and B, the only way for object A to influence object B is if it sends a signal. There has to be a force field, some medium that surrounds both objects. And then object A will send a signal, and that signal will flow through the force field and affect object B. And that's called localism. Okay? So instantaneous communication is impossible. That would be, so within that context, we cannot receive information, like information about the future or information about what's going on in someone else's mind, if we don't have some kind of medium between us, if there is no signal between us. So that's the view from classical physics. But what quantum physicists have found is that if you cut off a pair of electrons from an atom and then shoot them away from each other, so they're literally light years apart, and they're unobserved. If they're unobserved, it means their properties are not defined yet. And then you look at one, then the so-called spin, which is a property of the electron, the spin will come up so that the other electron will immediately have the opposite spin. Now what that's like is this, to sort of sum this up in very common sense terms, is like this. Let's say I'm going to spin from right to left, and every time I spin from right to left, I want my friend Michelle to spin in the opposite direction. So according to classical physics, if we're in a room together, I can say spin, and then we'll both start spinning. And the reason why Michelle knows to spin in the opposite direction is because I have created a signal. I have spoken, and I made the air molecules vibrate, and it struck her eardrum, and it went into her brain, so she knew what to do. Now, if we're in, say, outer space, then if I say spin, she won't hear it because there's a vacuum between us, and so she won't. So no signal can pass. But if I use like a cell phone, then radio waves can pass, and she'll know what to do. Now, what the quantum effect is, imagine that Michelle is in a spaceship moving west at the speed of light, and I'm in a spaceship moving east at the speed of light. And without saying anything, I just decide to start spinning. At exactly the same time, without any information from me, Michelle starts to spin in the other direction. at exactly the same time. No known signal can reach her from me because nothing moves faster than the speed of light. There's no way she could have known. And yet this happens. This happens at the subatomic level. When we see that this happens, it implies that information can be shared among existing phenomena instantaneously without a signal, without a medium or a force field. If that's the case, then theoretically it becomes possible for my mind to know about things that are happening very far away from me physically or even removed from me in time, say in the past or in the future. So then to say that these kinds of abilities are unscientific or superstitious is now sort of behind the times. Nothing about these kinds of abilities should be considered in principle unscientific anymore. And anybody who believes in this kind of stuff and decides to pursue it is really just asking the question, what are the limits of human possibility? What are the limits of our ability? That's all. Now, I'm not suggesting that we pursue these types of goals in our meditation, but I am suggesting that we open our minds, that the conflict between religious assertions of mystical ability and scientific theories about the universe are no longer in opposition with one another. The beliefs of religion no longer violate the most up-to-date theories of reality offered by modern physics. So that's just a note that I would like to make with all of you in the context of our conversation. But one way or the other, this is one goal of meditation that has been used. It's not as advertised as much in the mainstream media anymore. Another use of meditation are to gain its so-called psychotherapeutic benefits. And these benefits of meditation are very well recorded now in the mainstream press. Meditation is now used in therapy to treat anxiety and depression and anger, to treat any number of mental illnesses, even drug addiction, different kinds of phobias. It's well known many psychologists and psychotherapists and psychiatrists incorporate forms of meditation within their treatment strategies for psychotherapeutic ends. Beyond that, meditation is known for its performance enhancement. So I don't know if all of you remember, but in the 90s, Coach Phil Jackson of the Chicago Bulls in the NBA, the basketball team, famously taught Zen meditation to Michael Jordan and their teammates, and they went on to win the championship, 5-6 times. Tiger Woods famously uses Buddhist meditation to enhance his golf game, and I believe for the last at least 20 years, if not more, almost all Olympic athletes use visualization meditation techniques to enhance their own performance. So it's very much out there, even in the world of sports. More recently, Google, the internet company, installed, I believe, a Japanese Zen meditation room in their offices and required their employees to learn meditation to enhance their emotional regulation, to avoid interpersonal conflict among employees, to enhance their concentration and to reduce stress. So there's very practical uses of meditation. And then finally, there are the so-called spiritual goals of meditation. Many people, even though they may not belong to a specific religion, meditate to transcend their fear and their suffering, to enter into a higher realm of consciousness, a realm of inner purity, to maximize and realize our capacity for love and joy, to gain insight into the nature of reality. These spiritual goals also exist, divorced of their religious context, for meditation. So you have this really bewildering array of meditation styles and goals for meditation. And what I would like to talk about today is, well, how can we know which type of meditation we should use in our lives? What would be a good standard or criterion for choosing a goal, a meditative goal to adopt when we commit or if we commit to meditative practice? And in this context, I would like to share with you actually an ancient method of sort of categorizing the different kinds of meditation and evaluating their relative value and the efficacy of their goals. And this scheme is called the 5 kinds of sun. And it was originally introduced by a Chinese Buddhist monk named Guifeng Zongmi, who was a Tang Dynasty monk. And he was very interesting because he was at the same time an enlightened Sun Master and one of the greatest Buddhist scholars in history. So he had that rare combination of both spiritual and intellectual attainment. And he proposed that there were 5 basic kinds of sun meditation, 5 basic kinds of meditation in our context. And the first one he called heretical sun. And by heretical, that's the English translation. It means off the Buddha's path, that we have strayed off. And it is pejorative in its connotation. The idea is that you've strayed from the right path. And this is the development of supernatural abilities. This is using our breathing and energy regulation to know things about different places, to be able to predict the weather or predict who's going to come to dinner tonight. And so those type of meditation practices would fall within this category. And within not only within Buddhism, but within all of the major Asian spiritual traditions, Hinduism, Taoism, Confucianism, they're unanimous in their view of these so-called supernatural or psychic abilities. They consider them a minor side effect of spiritual practice, something that we don't really need to worry about too much. But they warn against becoming attached to them, because when we gain these unusual abilities, it tends to have a self-aggrandizing effect. It tends to make those kinds of practitioners narcissistic. And so it can have a negative effect on our personalities. So it's considered kind of a normal side effect of meditation, but one that can be potentially dangerous to our personal development. So that would be heretical sun. And then the next is called mundane sun. And this is the use of sun meditative techniques for so-called secular goals, like health enhancement, performance enhancement, greater appreciation of life. And all those kinds of meditation that I described to you before, psychotherapeutic uses of meditation, more sports performance enhancement, work performance enhancement, all those things would probably fall within that category. And the critique of this type of meditation is that although it's helpful, it doesn't really address the problem of impermanence. It doesn't address the problem of getting old, getting sick, and ultimately having to die. It doesn't eliminate the roots of suffering. All it does is really provide a kind of a convenience to us. So that's the judgment on that type of meditation. Beyond that, Zongmi lists so-called Hinayana meditation. Now, Hinayana is a pejorative term for certain types of South Asian Buddhism, which implies that certain types of interpretation of Buddhist teachings are limited and shallow and too small in scope. And within this context, the target of a criticism is a type of meditation where you think that our stray thoughts, our endlessly bubbling thoughts and emotions are the source of our suffering. Within Buddhism, they are considered literally the creators of the cycle of suffering. So these are the problem. And so what we want to do through our meditation is completely eliminate all distracting thoughts, to enter into a pure state of clarity, a completely empty state where we are completely undistracted, a state of pure awareness. And this type of meditation is judged to be somewhat retreatist and escapist. It's in a sense, a small-minded or limited response to the problem of suffering. After that, after the Hinayana sun meditation style, Zongmi lists the so-called Mahayana meditation style. And this is a meditation style that states that originally there is no thought that arises. Within the Hinayana scheme, the arising of one thought begins a sequence of events that creates the reality of suffering that we experience. Now, judging from what we just talked about earlier, the quantum physicist view, this isn't such a far-fetched idea, and it's not necessarily an abstract idea either. Certain kinds of thoughts may create certain kinds of realities. So from the Hinayana perspective, if we remove those thoughts, we remove those realities, because the realities we experience are the consequences of certain types of mental events in our minds. But the Mahayana perspective says that originally, there is no arising of thought. Originally, there is no distinction. There is no suffering to transcend. There is no enlightenment to attain. There is no delusion to dispel. There is no truth to recognize. There is no samsara to escape. There is no nirvana to arrive at. Everything that we experience as existence, as reality, is actually the expression and manifestation of our true self. To use traditional Buddhist terms, everything is a part of the truth body of Vairochana Buddha. So this is the Mahayana perspective on things. And then beyond that, in Sun Master Songdam's interpretation of Zongmi, there is the so-called supreme vehicle Sun. And in this type of practice, all conceptual viewpoints are dispensed with, both the Hinayana and the Mahayana. What we do in supreme vehicle Sun is we find an enlightened master, receive a hwadu from him or her to practice our meditation, and enter directly into Imoko. And no matter what happens, regardless of whatever we might hear or see or taste or feel with our bodies, we retain focus only on the state of doubt that the sun meditation produces. So no matter what happens, it's always Imoko. And this type of practice is described by the phrase, the thing in question is still. The thing in question is immediately still. The focus of our awareness and attention does not waver. The thing in question is this. The thing that's asking, what is this? What is this that's asking, what is this? In sun meditation, when we do Imoko, what we're trying to do is redirect our attention. Normally, we direct our attention at something outside of our consciousness, whether it's some object or person in the material world, or whether it's some thought or image or event happening within our minds. But within sun meditation, what we want to do is direct our attention, our awareness, back at itself, back at the source of its own awareness, the thing itself. And this is called turning the light of awareness around to reflect back on itself. This is the crux of meditation. Within this meditative practice, you don't worry about what happens after. You don't worry about enlightenment and liberation and whatever reality might be, and the attainment of love and freedom and happiness and all of those things. You are completely committed to the state of meditative doubt that comprises this form of practice. And this is considered the highest form of meditative practice within the Sun Buddhist scheme. So then the question becomes, well, what's the relationship between this supreme vehicle, sun meditation, and the other four? Heretical sun, mundane sun, Hinayana, and Mahayana sun. And what both Songmi and Sun Master Songdam propose is that the final supreme vehicle sun includes all the benefits of the other four. It includes them and supersedes them and transcends them. You are able to gain all the benefits of the other four without having to pay the cost, without having to encounter whatever problems or limitations might come from it. You can gain all of those benefits, but you won't have to suffer the negative consequences of a limited goal. This is the most important part of meditation, especially at the outset of meditation. What will we take as our goal of meditation? What is our intention? Within Buddhist teaching, all Buddhist teaching, intention is the key. Motivation is the key. Within Buddhist teaching, it's said that intention, the quality of our intention determines the quality of our action, which in turn determines the quality of the consequences of our behavior. Positive intention creates positive behavior, which creates positive consequences for us. Negative intention creates negative behavior, which in turn creates negative consequences for us. I would very much like to stress the importance of our intention in practice, because when we choose to commit to a meditative practice, we are choosing a path of self-cultivation that will change our bodies, change the structure of our minds, change the way we behave, and ultimately change the way we live. It is literally a life-changing decision, and one that should be made with the utmost seriousness. So this is ultimately what I've come to share with all of you today is when you choose whatever form of meditation you would like to undertake, think very carefully about the ultimate goal. Think very carefully about the consequences this will have on us. Through the sun meditation that I've shared with you today, we can gain all of those health benefits, all those curative aspects. We can transcend our normal level of consciousness and revolutionize and transform our consciousness. But those individual effects should not be our goal. We should stay, even if we're not yet committed to, say, a Buddhist religious point of view, even so, when we meditate, we should meditate to attain the state of doubt for the goal of ultimate enlightenment. So this is what I've come to share with you today.
I'm so happy with the subject matter today because it's something that I've been sort of investigating in my personal practice. And the question I have for you relates to a book, something you're talking about in a book you may know, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind.
Yeah.
It's kind of a famous.
Yeah, it's like a classic.
Yeah. In it, at one point he's kind of talking about what you were saying about the supreme vehicle, in that meditating without external goals.
Kantaza.
Shikantaza, yeah.
It means just sitting.
Right. But the question I have is if we are, one thing he mentions is the need to continuously encourage ourselves in our practice. So I guess my question is, now in a very long way, how do we continue to encourage ourselves without having any types of goals, without having any type of conceptual goal?
We do need a very high level of motivation, and that motivation properly from the Buddhist context should come from our understanding of impermanence. So then the question becomes, well, how do I keep my mind fixed on impermanence? And the answer to that was provided by my teacher's teacher, a monk named Sun Master Changang. And he said, he was asked, how can we stay, fervent and urgent in our practice? And he said, look at the world around you. In any season but winter, you'll probably, if you look around, see a dead insect. It's becoming autumn, see the leaves changing. Flip through your photo album and you'll see younger versions of yourself. Where, it's right on us, the impermanence. The trick is to feel it keenly. And what happens is that there's a reciprocal relationship. The more we meditate, the more clear our minds become. The more clear our minds become, the more clear our perception becomes. Then we see what's really happening in the world. We see what's happening within our own bodies. We observe the impermanence of all these things that we think are permanent features. Our beliefs, our political beliefs, our social beliefs, our identity, it's all changing all the time. When we see that, it pushes us deeper into meditation. I hope that's helpful.
That is. Thank you very much.
So, any other questions? Yeah.
So
you can ask me in Korean. Do you want me to answer in Korean too?
then Hwan-san, you repeat his question
yeah,
in English,
actually,
okay?
why don't we do that? I'll translate his question in English and then I'll.
초기 불교, 남방 상자부 불교 쪽에 공부하신 분들하고도 이렇게 만날 일이 있거든요. 그러면 그분들의 말씀은 부처님이 실제로 수행하신 방법은 다른 방법인데 그 간화선 화두 참구 이목고라든가 이렇게 하는 것은 그 중국의 그 대종고 스님 그런 그 중국의 선사들이 만든 방법이고 이건 부처님이 실제로 이 방법으로 깨달은 건 아니지 않느냐. 그러면 부처님의 제자라면 이 방법을 따르는 것이 과연 어떠하냐 이런 이렇게 얘기를 할 때가 있거든요. 근데 그럴 때는 저도 들으면 헷갈려요. 그러니까 그래서 어쨌든 그런 의심을 좀 이렇게 의문을 해소하고 싶어서 좀 여쭤보고 싶습니다. 어떻게 생각하시는지.
What he asked me is this. There are Buddhist, the formal term I think is Theravadan Buddhists, but Buddhist practitioners in South and Southeast Asia claim to use the exact same practice methods that were used by the historical Buddha. The Sun Buddhism was basically invented by Chinese people who received the Indian teachings and reinterpreted them and kind of invented this new way of meditating. Well, why don't we just use what the Buddha originally used and use his original method since it's the one that the Buddha, isn't that the most authentic form of meditation there is? 살아 생존 시에도 부처님께서 그 방편을 쓰셔서 각 제자의 근기에 따라서 수행법을 가르쳐 주시고 맡기셨다고 합니다. 그래서 어떤 분은 수식관, 이렇게 호흡을 하는 거, 어떤 때는 그 백골관, 이렇게 시체가 이제 이렇게 썩어가는 이제 것을 보고 그래서 이제 이게 무상감을 이제 느끼고 무상을 깨달을 수 있게 그렇게 했으니까. 그리고 사실은 그 이제 석가모니 부처님께서 어떤 수행법을 쓰셨는지 아무도 모른다고 합니다. 부처님께서 열반하신 한 수백 년 후에 이런 모든 경전과 어록을 이렇게 다 기록을 했다고 합니다. 근데 이제 그때 당시에 이제 부처님께서 열반하신 한 뭐 몇백 년 안에 생긴 그 종파들이 다 똑같은 주장을 합니다. 우리가 가르친 것이 부처님께서 실제적으로 하신 거고, 우리가 가르친 것이 부처님께서 실제로 설법하신 것이다. 부처님의 그 속 안에 있는 말로 표현할 수 없는 뜻을 터득해서 우리 시대에 맞게끔 적용해야 되는 것이 아닌가. 양쪽이 일리가 있다고 생각하고, 마지막에는 이게 굉장히 간단한 대답인데 자기 체질에 맞는 공부법 하는 것이 좋아요. Thank you very much for listening, and this will conclude my talk for today. Thank you very much. May we all attain the Buddha.